everybody. Had to find another spot. I'm glad everybody could make it. I feel like I haven't been on for a while. We'll wait a few more minutes. Wait for some more people. My dog isn't enjoying the door being closed. All right. I hope everybody had a good 4th of July weekend. I guess I'll give everybody the scoop. I am down to my final 100 hours of supervision, which I'll be wrapping up very shortly, and I'll be able to sit hopefully next month. Hopefully all this hard work is going to pay off.
Definitely will. It's a long road and it's a hard journey, but you work at it, you're going to get there.
I did it at my own pace. I think that was probably the best thing for me.
I agree.
Because I'm so burnt out, but I feel so ready. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just another disclaimer too. I record all of my sessions. Sometimes I forget, and sometimes it didn't take. But if it does take, and I do remember, then I post to the YouTube channel. So if you don't want your name or your picture or your video up, that's fine. Just you can change your name, or turn your video off. That's fine too. It's got some test takers. You guys are going to be ready. You guys are going to be ready. Every one of y'all will be. Every one of y'all. The big thing I've noticed is it's coming down to not so much how much I know, it's coming down to how much I can apply it. So I'm very grateful that I've really worked hard on, the background knowledge, but the application piece is what I've been focusing on since about, I want to say the beginning of the year, taking several different mocks and looking for any kind of questions I get my hands on, because now the application piece is just as much or more important. Because if I can't apply it, and if I read a question, I don't see how the things fit in, fall in, then I'm scared I'm gonna be in trouble. And then slowing down is my problem. I go too fast. I look for those keywords or phrases and I run with it. But when I take my time, it's just a small percentage that makes a difference. But you guys got it. You guys got this in the bag. Really do. All right. I guess I'm going to go ahead and get started if you guys don't mind. I'm not sharing my PowerPoint for obvious reasons. Majority of the information has come from BAS Supervisor Guide. And to be real honest, a lot of the other PowerPoint presentations I pulled from Cooper and Behavior Analysis for Lasting Change. But out of respect to the BAS Supervision Guide and all the stuff he does, I just don't want to put all his stuff out there. Just out there like that. So I just want to keep it just in this kind of presenting thing too. But the more I look at all the presentations I've done for measurement through Cooper or Behavior Lasting Change, I got some resources from myself, and that's why I put a lot of stuff in there. Tonight, we're going to look at measurement. And I think what really kind of helps me with measurement, at least lately, my last, another go around cycling through measurement concepts and all that, is I sat through a session a while back through one of my study partners. He led discontinuous continuous measurement. And that's how I've really kind of divided measurements. I know we got derivative measures and all the other stuff, but I had to look at discontinuous and continuous. Continuous being that gold standard, as he said, of we always want duration and latency and frequency and all that. But when we can't get those gold standards, time sampling is the way to go. But I just thought that was really neat the way he broke it down to, we want frequency, but if we can't get frequency, partial interval recordings always, it might be the better route to go. If I can't get duration, I may have to get whole interval recording. It just comes down to what I can and can't do based on the restraints that are given. And I just thought that was interesting. That's my little tidbit that I got. I just wanted to share that with you guys. All right, AO1 is measuring frequency. I really don't know how to coin this and make this, super easy or super hard, because I think the majority of us got it. When you look at frequency, like I said a minute ago, it kind of is the gold standard. How many, how much, how many instances. It's just a simple tally, according to Cooper, is simple tally of occurrences. How many times did he pick up the book? How many times did he pick up this? How many times did he do this? This is a big reason why I have clickers, those little golf clickers or whatever clickers, counters in my measurement kit. When I look for frequency and count, and it kind of splits off a little bit into rate, I want to count just how often it occurs. But there's a huge remembering that there has to be a clear onset and a clear offset. So if it went, that's going to be really hard to keep track of frequency. But if there's a clear beginning and clear end, then it's much easier to keep track of those occurrences also. I want to make sure that we're also aware that rate is, we take that count part and then we add time. That's where our stair acceleration chart really looks at, is rate. And I kind of slipped in that stair acceleration chart business because I'm working on a book right now, and it looks at fit learning, fit teaching. And she mentions a lot of precision teaching. She's mentioned a lot of rate, a little bit of some measurement pieces in the last couple of pages I've read. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. When she looks at rate, those instances over time, then she brings in that stair acceleration chart, which is used in precision teaching, that pinpointing part to show that the behavior is increasing or decreasing, because that's what we're measuring to see if there's an improvement or not an improvement. But when we look at rate, that responses per time. So when we look at that stair acceleration chart, if we're going to use rate in that case, it's how many responses per hour, how many responses per day, per month, per week, per year. And that's how we're going to track it across time. I loved how she mentioned rate, and I kind of wanted to throw that in there. I'm working on a book called Blind Spots. It's by Kimberly Behrens. Ryan O'Donnell name dropped it several times on Facebook, and I put my name in one of his deals, and I got a book from him. And I've been working on it. It's cool. It looks at shaping, how, where I got so far, how shaping can really work to improve mastery of concepts for our learners. If I get a little everywhere, I'm sorry, guys. I get a little excited on certain things. So, all right, AO2 is rate. And I think I just mentioned rate by adding it to my other slide. It simply is the ratio of count per observation time. That just sounds like a lot of stuff going on. Cooper looks at it as responses unit per unit of time. It's basically, we have our instances and we have time. If you see a mock question, what really helps me out with these mock questions is if I see just a number of, and you gotta really be careful, because sometimes it looks like a latency question or a response question, and you really gotta look for it. It could be just a frequency. How many instances? If they're looking for rate, how many instances with that given time period? So you have to look at the whole question of what they're asking. And sometimes it is easier to read the last part of it and see what they're looking for. But rate has that time piece and has that response piece put together. Am I going too fast, too slow? Am I losing anybody just yet? I don't want to. I think frequency and rate are some of those things that it's kind of like it's those gold standard type things on the way up. Duration. And I also kind of use a lot of these from the study sessions, and I also did a thing for measurement for my teachers. I think it's really important that our teachers understand that we look for frequency, we look for rate, and we also look for duration. Duration is just a fancy word for how long did that response occur. Obviously, when we take duration data, we're looking for a behavior that has that long onset. If we're looking for quick claps, I really wouldn't need duration data. But if I'm singing for long periods of time, or I'm yelling for long periods of time, I might want to see how long that singing occurs, so I can maybe shorten up that singing a little bit if it's inappropriate in class. But it's basically the basic measure of temporal extent, how long or how short the onset to the endpoint of the response. It's measured in units of time, because it's a time piece, and it's important when measuring the amount of time when a person engages in a target behavior. Latency is kind of fun. If you, it used to bug the fire out of me, and I don't know what clicked and how it clicked. But when I think of a runner in the Olympics coming up, I don't care where you live in the world, everyone's probably gearing up for the Olympics. But when that runner hits the starting blocks and he puts his fingers down, he gets in there, he's ready to go. A lot of track coaches, they keep track of how much time takes place when the gun first goes off, that first just boost, that first just burst of speed. And that first, burst of speed is really latency. How long did it take for the gun to go off before we started running? That cue, that signal, and then the behavior began. And of course, they measure from start to finish. There's duration for when the runner left the blocks to when the runner crossed the finish line. There's a duration part right there. We can also do frequency. How many races did the runner participate in during an event? We do the 100, the 200, the 4x1. That's 3 races. That's a count of 3. We want to add a rate piece into it. We could say 3 events over the span of 2 hours. So 3 per 2, we could break it down even further than that probably. But measurement, if you really stop and think about it, plays a big role in a lot of things that we do, and a lot of things that we do as aspiring behavior analysts. But latency is that measurement from that cue to when the response happens. In the classroom, we look at it typically as how long the student begins their work. I give the signal, I give the cue, the instruction to begin work, and I need a subsequent response of they begin to work. If I give a student a direction to clean their area, how long does it take for that student to respond? So that's a really important piece as well. Measure inter-response time. Now, when we look at inter-response time now we're looking at the time between those consecutive instances. So latency would be the light's red, turned green. How long did it take before I put my foot on the pedal? There's my response before I took off. Inter-response time could be I have 8 different stoplights consecutively. So I'm going to have 8 different behaviors consecutively within this, chain of traffic. Probably some road rage along there too. And some extinction bursts for not being that, never mind. But anyways, we press we put our foot on the gas, it turns green, we have a new stoplight, and then we have a new stoplight, and so forth. And then we would have that time between, how much time did it take between each stoplight before I put my foot back on the gas again. Another thing could be bites when kids eat. I was actually having this discussion with my wife the other day. We're at lunch, and it's funny because my son eats super fast when he's with me, and he eats super slow when she's around. But we still need that healthy time between bites. That would be IRT. The consecutive instances, the consecutive responses would be the bite, eating of the food, and we need to know how much time elapses between each bite. A shorter IRT would have a quick response. A longer IRT would have a shorter response. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Mom says time to eat. How long did it take him before he began eating? But then inter-response time could be between those bites. So sometimes we need to look at the time between behaviors. For example, like I just said, the eating too fast and eating too slow. Once again, am I going too fast, too slow? Is this kind of maybe just making more and more sense to me? I don't know. BAS Supervisor Guide mentions IRT, sorry for the typo, is a time between the end of a response and the beginning of another same response. Sounds the same wordage to me. 2 consecutive responses, probably 2 or more consecutive responses. So we're waiting for the end of one and the beginning of another. Child hits his forehead with a boxing glove with only 2 to 10 seconds between each hit before getting his forehead, hitting again. That was the Gracie. Hold on. Sorry about that. My dog keeps coming in and out. You can also look at this in another perspective too, a boxing match or a mixed martial arts match. I've heard of, occupational behavioral management, OBM, used for sports, and I can kind of see that right now in just this example. Would you want a fast IRT or a slow IRT when you have 2 fighters in a ring who are boxing? You would probably want a faster IRT. You wouldn't want a guy taking it and then hitting again and then waiting. You'd want some quick IRT, some quick inter-response time between those punches. AO6% of occurrence. The one thing that's really kind of stuck with me on percent of occurrence is the 30 response opportunities. It just makes so much sense because you could, at the end of the day, when you look at percentage of occurrence, you have that percentage tied to it. It's right there with it. And that's how we know. Johnny did so many things, and 75% of it was whatever it was. But also, how many occurrences happened? I'll give you an example. When I taught third grade, we had this reading quiz that we do every Wednesday or Friday, depending on when I did it. Probably was very consistent because I didn't bounce around day to day. But anyways, it had 5 questions, and sometimes it had 8 questions, and sometimes it had 10 questions. And was not fair was, before I knew all this percent of occurrence stuff, they did 5 questions, 6 questions, 8 questions, whatever, like I said, and that's their comprehension of reading for the week. Not a lot of opportunities, not very many. So I graded very harshly on that. So if you missed one, you would drop to a 90, 80, and so forth. But I didn't have a lot of opportunities versus a math worksheet with 30 problems, and I could grade it and go, okay, this kid knows their math facts based on that percentage of occurrence. And now we had a conversation earlier about me and Marcia did about I'm going to butcher the word, I can't say it, derivative measures, when it takes percent of occurrence and trials per criterion and slaps them together. Well, that makes me think a lot about, stuff I was doing in school. We would do trials per criterion. How many math sheets did it take for us to master that concept? But at the same time, we use percent of occurrence to make sure we had it down. And that percent of occurrence was that lasting number that showed, okay, we got it, and we did this many trials in that percent. I look back at when I was doing home health briefly, that got me into all this. We would do 80% across 3 days. So we'd have our percent of occurrence. We do 10 trials a day. So we have that occurrence, and we put it in there. There's our 3 days, trials per criterion. Bam, there's that there's that measure right there in there. But that bubbles chart and that flow chart, it looked beautiful, but how many trials we had? How many responses we had also. And I know I'm kind of getting a little bit around everywhere, but going back to percent of occurrence, it's really important that you have at least 30 opportunities. If we do 1, how strong is that 100%? If you do 10, how strong is that 100%? So you need to have a good amount of responses that really show the learner what they really did. And of course, permanent product is another way that shows, that measures through performance how the learner did. That's why it's also important that our children, our students, present that work. And the cool thing about permanent product is it also is an easy way of knowing the learner does something. If we're measuring how many towels they fold, if we're learning how many times, if we're keeping track how many times they put something together on an assembly line, that product tells us how they got it. And we can slap on a percent of occurrence on there and make it that measure as well. But back to percent of occurrence, it's that ratio divided by, it's basically that percentage. When you grade your mock question, your mock exams that we all take, every 10 billion of them we've taken, how many we got right? Over 160. And then we create a percent of occurrence, how many we got right. Sorry if I'm dancing around a little bit everywhere, guys. It's just starting to really come together a little bit for me, more and more every time. Trials per criterion, I'll just try to make a little graph there that kind of has some stuff that really kind of showed a little bit of what we'd be looking for. Kevin had a really cool thing when I did his questions last year, and it really kind of helped me, was I looked for the criterion. Is it 3 consecutive days, 4 consecutive days, 2 consecutive days, whatever? How many consecutive days? So I look for that number. I look for a row of 4 in a row, 3 in a row. And then then the next thing I look for is the criterion. Is it 80%, 70%, 90%, 85%? Then I look for that. And if if we hit that number of opportunities needed for that achievement, bam, then I can go, okay, 10 trials, we got it in 10 trials. That's been helping me out a ton with trials per criterion. Because when I did the thing with Kevin, I'd break it down into, okay, this day, this day, this day. And what just helped me out was how many days, what's the consecutive days for criterion? And then I can go, and then at the end of it, I can go, how many days did it take? So in this case, if it took 3 days, well, my thing here says 4 consecutive days. I didn't put, yeah, I got 4 plus marks in a row. So 4 consecutive days for criterion, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like 21 days. It took 21 days to meet criterion. And I'm saying that because I looked for the 4 plus marks in a row, and that's my criterion, 4 consecutive days in a row. And then counting from the last, the fourth plus mark was 21 days. So it took 21 days to meet criterion in this example that is nameless and doesn't have anything to go with it. Interobserver Agreement, IOA, was really helped me out with IOA, and all of my mock questions and all of the things that I've encountered comes right down to what Ryan Sane said, one of the Sitecore guys in a Zoom just like this. It's believability. We put 2 people or more people, they're observing that event and they see what's going on, and it increases that believability of what happened in the room. So it just kicks up the validity of our data, the reliability of our data, because we have 2 or 3 more people, 2 or more people, they're believing what they see because they've seen it together. Are they always going to be right? No. Are they always going to be wrong? No. But we need 80% of agreement that shows that everyone's on the same page and we have that believability. IOA refers to the degree which 2 or more independent observers report the same observed values after observing the same events. We put 2 people in the room. We don't want them sitting by each other. We don't want them sitting near each other, probably opposite ends of the room. And they are keeping track of the behavior or whatever based on what we told them to look for. We want them away from each other because if they talk, that could create some problems. If they can't really share their work at this thing, it doesn't really work like that. My supervisor, when we did IOA together, we go to a room and do data together, we'd be on opposite ends. We weren't sharing or comparing our notes. But the benefits of IOA are they determine the competence of new observers. So we bring somebody in, do they understand what we're looking for? Did we give a very good, clear definition, observable and measurable definition for them? It detects observer drift. Observer drift is when the observer drifts away from what we wanted them to do in the first place. So if we're looking for a certain behavior and they start to drift away from that definition and kind of look for their own thing, we need to know that through IOA. It helps us judge clarity of definitions in the system itself. We're not 100% always right. We're not. So does our definition need clarification? Does our system need to be tweaked a little bit? Like I said before, the best thing for me is it increases that believability of data. I really wanted to share this because I put this together a while back. It came from Cooper, the third, I can't even, my brain's just shutting down on me here. The 3rd edition. It kind of breaks them all down, the different types of IOA formulas. Total count, total duration have a lot in common. We can do total latency, we can do total whatever, but we're taking that smaller count, smaller duration, and we're dividing by the large. When we do mean count, we're also, it's a lot like mean duration. It'd be a lot like mean latency. We're taking the average of each interval and we're multiplying by 100. So if you really kind of look at these different types, there really isn't 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. There really isn't 8. There really isn't 9 different types here in the screen. It's really more less than that, because they really kind of come together based on what we're looking for. Interval by interval and trial by trial, that's the same thing. Which ones do we agree on? Which ones do we disagree on? Well, pretty much agreed on. Divide by total number of trials. Interval by interval, same thing. Scored, how many did we both score? Divided by the total number of intervals that were scored, whether we both agreed or disagreed. And then unscored, the same kind of what, it's in the same deal there. But I thought this was really cool. I really want to share it. And I have some slides that I pulled from another presentation I did earlier, and it has Sitecore guys. So I hope I'm not making y'all nervous or if I'm going too fast. But calculating IOA agreement, the best resource for me, and I know it's a pay resource, was I went to Rouge, and Rouge had the application workbook. The first 30 pages is nothing but measurement. We look at NCR, we do some IOA, we do all kinds of stuff, and the IOA is great. It breaks down each one, and you get that practice. And that's what really helped me out with IOA, just getting that practice. And it really helps out a lot. But this is from a different slide, different presentation, same thing I just said before. We're training or retaining the observers and the recording skills. We're involving 2 or more observers. We want believability, and we want that consistency right there. Total count, here's an example from Sitecore. We take our smaller count, divide by our large count, and then we basically, that doesn't match up correctly. My example doesn't match up correctly, so ignore my example. It says mean count per interval. I just now caught that. I should have caught that when I first did this. But total count would be, in this case, I would add all observer 1s, then observer 2s, and then I put the smaller count divided by a larger count. Exact count per interval is a lot like interval by interval. It's a lot like trial by trial. We are taking the intervals that we agreed on and then dividing by the total number of intervals. So in this case, we only have 5 intervals, but we only agreed on 2 of them. We have 2 out of 5, and it's 40%. Because I would multiply, and you could do all that multiplication stuff, and then it would be all that. Trial by trial, exact same thing, just has a different name on top of it. The ones we agreed, divide by total number of trials. I apologize for the first one. I can't believe I missed that until now. That's wild business. Interval by interval. Once again, same thing like the last 2 slides. Trial by trial. Which ones do we agree on? In this case, we agreed interval by interval 1, interval 3, interval 4. That's 3 out of 5. You break it down, it's 60%. Timing is really no different than the other way around. when we broke it down, count, we could do the same thing for latency. We could do the same thing for duration. If we wanted to compare, there's that line in there, the mean duration per occurrence. If we want to do mean count per occurrence, looking for that average, well, average is average. So if we're looking for an average for count, same thing applies for duration, same thing applies for latency. Average is an average. So when you look at the average for each interval, and then we add them together and divide by, or multiply by 100, it's the same thing. Average is an average. Mean is a mean. I think that's kind of what I try to do. Put two together. Yeah, there's my line right there. I'll try and put two together. I guess I just see it differently when I do it again. Score interval, like I said earlier, in this case, this example from Sitecore, we look at the ones where we both scored, which would be interval 1 and interval 2. Interval 1, interval 4. We both agreed that it happened. So we take that 2 and now we divide it by all the intervals that either we both scored or one of them scored. And then it'd be 50%. 4/5. Score interval 2 out of 4. Yeah, 2 out of 4, 50%. Interval 3 threw me off for a second there, but it does. We're not even worried about interval 3 because in the case of scored, we have our 2 score we scored on divided by 4 that were scored by somebody. And then unscored is the opposite. We would do 1 divided by 3. So we have the 1 that we both agreed on, and we have 1, 2, 3 that we had unscored, whether we both agreed or not. So 1/3 would be unscored. A09, evaluate the accuracy and reliability of measurement procedures. I pulled this from a Cooper slide that I did. We're looking at validity, accuracy, and reliability. Validity looks at, it yields data directly relevant to the phenomenon measured and the reasons for measuring it. There are valid reasons. Valid measures requires 3 important elements. Social significance of the target behavior. That's really helped me out with social validity when I look at that social validity part of it. The behavior the peers are doing. If they're not doing it and we're worried about our kid, our client, that there's no social validity there. If everyone in class is eating with their mouth open and we're going to teach our kid to chew with his mouth closed, there's no social validity there. If everyone ate with their mouth closed and then we taught our kid to eat with his mouth closed, now we're having some social significance for that target behavior. Another important element measures a dimension of the behavior relevant to the question, and also ensure the data are representative. And then accuracy. What helps me out with accuracy, I go right back to Celia, that true value, that true observed value. Are we both using a scale? Are we both using a ruler? Are we both using a tape measure? Are we both measuring it the way it's supposed to be measured and it has that true value? Because if I don't have a true value, then I'm definitely going to start messing with that accuracy. True value requires special observation and recording procedures, must at least somewhat different from those to produce the data being evaluated. And the differences must have the effect of minimizing the possibility of error. That's from Johnson and Pennypacker. Then, of course, we have reliability. Measurement yields the same values across repeated measurement of the same event. Sorry, can't talk tonight. So we keep measuring it. We go over it again, and we're getting the same thing on that same event over and over and over again. So we have that reliability, and we have accuracy. we don't have accuracy, then we're not going to have reliability. So if we have reliability, then we're going to have we can have accuracy. We can have accuracy with reliability, but we can't have reliability without accuracy because we need those true values that measure that same event. I think I just answered my own question that I've been struggling with for the longest time. You can't have reliability without accuracy. Accuracy is what's actually true. It's most important. These are some utility things to look at when doing mock questions from the BAS Supervisor Guide. So what's actually true, what's actually the most important, what's the most directly relevant measurement. That's why we have our external validity, our internal validity, and our social validity. What is relevant? Does it go to others? Can it go to other people, other clients, other things? Have they external validity? Do we have internal validity? Do we have all of our true values and relevant data that's creating all that goodness? Then do we have that social validity? Is the behaviors that we're measuring for change or want for change relevant to our peers, relevant to our clients doing? Then, of course, reliability of information, consistency, and can reveal problems when it is low. I continue to have those aha moments. I really do. Reliability and validity. Reliable measure is one that is repeatable. It's just every time I measure it, I get on the scale, it's the same number all the time. Obviously, I want it lower, but it's reliable. I get on a scale, it has my weight. I get another scale, it's the same number. I get that consistency no matter where I go and how I do it. I go to the doctor's office, I weigh this much. I go home, I weigh this much. If I go there, I weigh more. There's no consistency there. That's why I'm just realizing I'm fat. But if there's consistency, then it's a reliable measure. The measurement system produces consistent findings. They're repeatable. So when I use that ruler, I use that yardstick, and I use that tape measure, and I use that scale, am I producing consistent findings every time? If I'm not, then they're not really reliable. A tape measure and a yardstick and a ruler are pretty reliable. Can't really mess those up. The numbers are right there. It is what it is. But a scale can create some issues. A speed gun or anything that uses batteries or has something going on with it, yeah, you may have some, reliability issues. Valid measure is one that gauges what it claims to measure. So if we're measuring for height, then we need to have a ruler or something like that. If we're measuring for weight, then we need to have a scale. So we need to have something that gauges what it claims to measure. And if it doesn't, then it's not valid. A10, design, plot, and interpret data using equal interval graphs. This is really just kind of a review of equal interval graphs. Our y-axis is our vertical, and our x-axis is our horizontal. When we look at our x, it's usually time. How many sessions, how many days, how many opportunities. There's some kind of unit of time on the bottom x-axis. Rogue looks at Axio. We have that Abisca with the x and the ordinate with the y. Y is your dependent value, is your dependent value. Instances, percentages, frequency, duration. What do we measure? And then, of course, the time on the bottom side. It really hit me today in that book I was reading. When we measure the behavior in question that we're trying to increase or decrease, the behavior that we change through that dependent value, that's what we measure, the change. And how many sessions and how many days or whatnot based on that. design and plot using a cumulative record. I'm still getting a little bit better at cumulative record, a lot better than I have before. Cumulative record is a record of behaviors that is just that, a record of all the behaviors that have occurred over time. I have encountered a lot of questions that have cumulative record in there. So if I want to measure how many YouTube subscribers I have over time, this would be what I would use. I start out with 0, and then I get 10, and then I get 5 more. I mean, I'm only at 130, or well, it's not a ton. But my point is, I could keep a record of how many people have joined that and subscribed over time. That would be the best way to go. How many people subscribed in a month? How many people subscribed in a year? How many people subscribed over a week? That cumulative record is just all those behaviors that occurred during that time period. A cumulative record never decreases, never. That tall, steep slope, that indicates more incidence of the behavior. We don't have a slope, we just have a straight line, then we didn't have much responding to begin with. But a flat line is no performance. So in this graph, there are several instances of no performance, but we do have several steep slopes showing more instances of the target behavior. So the first couple of minutes in that 30-minute interval, nothing happened. And then we had a little slope, then nothing happened. Then we had a slope, then nothing happened. And then huge increase in the behavior. Then it leveled off a little bit some more, huge increase again, and so forth. A12, sorry about that. A12, design and implement continuous measurement procedures. Like I said before, we look at continuous measurement, that's the gold standard. When we look at temporal extent, temporal locus, and repeatability, and all that good stuff, continuous measurement, that's the gold standard. But it also can include narrative event recording and ABC event recording in any direct observation. This is from the BAS Supervisor Guide. A13, design and implement discontinuous measurement systems, aka time sampling. I just pulled an old slide of what I went when I've done time sampling before. You need to be careful also. I've been in several study sessions where they can show you through examples that whole interval recording, why it underestimates the occurrence of behavior and how it can really overestimate a behavior. So you got to be careful. And the same goes for partial interval recording. Whole interval recording is, I don't have time to do duration data. I would like to do duration data, but I don't have that time. So I'm going to set up some short intervals to catch those behaviors that have long occurrences, and I'm going to keep track if it happens throughout the interval. So if it doesn't happen at the beginning, but it happens throughout the rest of it, it doesn't count. That's just the catch-22 of it. We want the whole entire interval, and it underestimates the actual occurrence of the behavior, because it may happen 98% of the interval, but since it didn't happen for the other two, we're not going to count it. Partial interval is for a behavior that we want to decrease, so we're going to overestimate it. We don't have time to do frequency. We don't have time to do repeatability. We don't have time to do count. So we're going to do partial interval recording. So anytime it happens in the interval, we keep track, it happened, boom, we're done. My supervisor said something to me a while back, and it has stuck. If we're collecting partial interval recording data and the behavior occurs at the beginning of the interval, Do I need to worry about it for the rest of the interval? No. I can walk out the room, I can go eat a sandwich, I can leave, whatever I can do that in that time that interval takes. I answer a phone call because I got it. It happened. So the whole interval counts. So partial interval, anytime it happened during the interval. So if it happened early, we can kind of chill for a little bit. But if it didn't happen early, we better be on the ball waiting for it to happen if it occurs. And we're also looking to overestimate the actual occurrence of the behavior. Momentary time sampling it can underestimate the occurrence of behavior. What's really helped me with momentary time sampling is a timepiece. So when I see this on a mock question, I think of a teacher has 26 kids. Teacher has 20 kids. Teacher has her hand full. Para has her hands full. So obviously the para or the teacher is busy. They don't have time to do continuous measurement. They have time to do momentary time sampling. So momentary time sampling would be the best thing for them to do based on the constraints that are happening. So we set that interval up, timer goes off, we check to see if it happened. That's momentary time sampling. Timer occurs, did it happen or did it not happen? Now, planned activity check, plot check, is exactly the same thing. But instead of looking at one person, we're going to look at a group of people. That's the only real difference between plot check and momentary time sampling. And it looks like that's my last slide. Did I go too fast, too slow? I just followed the task list and what the BAS Supervisor Guide had, and that's what I covered. That's just where we went to on all of that. From what I've gathered from my study friends who have taken the test, it just straight task list. So that's what I've been focusing on, the BAS Supervisor Guide, because it goes straight through the order, some explanations, and goes there. I'm sure there's other things you could do. Those things in ABA study group that have this and have that, and break it down and what chapter Cooper and what chapter Past the Big and what chapter this. But I just really been focusing on the task list and how it relates to the material. And then I go back and, on my mocks and my content questions and see, get those questions in there and see how it kind of rolls in there. Like, for example, verbal behavior. I have an idea where I'm at, but the questions they're looking for are based on the task list. They're not asking me for superstitious mans on most mocks. They're not asking me for holistic mans or any of that stuff. They're basically code training, interval training, tact training, man training, and then what I've seen on several mocks, those verbal operants all together. Yeah, that's what I've been doing too, and I've just been tightening my task list, so I know the general content, and then just working on questions, seeing how it relates to get my brain going, and of course get me to slow down. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with me on a Monday night, more than you guys realize. I'm sorry I've kind of disappeared lately, but I will come back, and I'm working on wrapping up B, which is basically me putting my stuff in with his stuff and all that. But I'm going to probably we're going to do experimental design next week. And it appears that my weak spot right now, I still can't believe it, is D. So we may go back to D and hit that. But Monday for sure, we're going to do experimental design. Kind of go over the designs and kind of see from there. The big thing I've seen on mock questions is you got to be really careful. What design goes with the question? What design has this, has this, has this? Your visual inspection, your visual analysis, the trend, the variability, all those things. I don't like all the above or none of the above because they're not on the test, but you need to look at those graphs and understand what they're looking for. But I'm going to go over all that next week. And thank you guys so much for spending some time with me. And I'll see y'all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Patrick. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.